Hey, Paul here again with my starter template series, and we're rolling into the fifth hour of building this godforsaken dock, and it's taking so long because if you've been following these videos to the word, I'm taking so much time explaining all the concepts, talking about all the best practices, and generally doing a really deep dive into how things are best made in Coda. So yeah, hopefully we are now finishing. As always, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe there's part 6. Let's see how this goes. We get back to our dock where we left yesterday, and we are at 47 objects out of 50. So we only have 3 objects left and some beautification to get done. All right, so one of the things that I was showing you in the previous part, and perhaps I uh, haven't finished explaining that as I should. So we've created all these statuses not for nothing. So even if you wish to use a conditional format, so these are now your very valuable asset, the status column. And if you have things that have some sort of a workflow, like classes that are scheduled, ongoing, past, cancelled, whatever, or tasks that are to do, doing, done, whatever, or whatever, basically whatever. Uh, it's always a very good idea to calculate the status and then depend on that status for your other calculations. Maybe you need a filter to filter out done or not done tasks instead of using that is done checkbox, or using something that's inherently hidden from here, or using something that's again is calculated again, like filter everything that due by is not like set. And okay, here's a perfect example of that. We have our filter that's set up on a hidden column. So it's always a good idea whenever you have a status on your table, so you start having a status, you sort of now have a centralized way of calculating that status. And when you have that status, and it can be one column or it can be multiple columns, maybe these are two independent things, the to do done and then reopened or not reopened, maybe these are two separate things. You will have two separate columns calculating these things, and then you build your filters and build everything else on those status columns, and the ones that are visible anyway. So because right now, if I'm a dock maintainer and I go into the filter and I check the filter and I don't immediately see the is done here, okay, I sort of can assume what's happening behind the scenes, but again, it's better to depend for status is not done. And yeah, please, once again, I want to highlight that. Don't do ever things like this row status, this row status equals a string done, not string done, because, well, okay, hide done, nothing happens, right? So what a regular Coda user who's maybe first time using Coda, they don't know about at references, they don't necessarily know about comparing row references together. I see this mistake all the time in the community. What they start doing, so okay, it doesn't work like that, so they do the toText here, and then it kind of starts working for them and they are happy that okay, they've set up their filter. Please don't do that, because first you can go into the statuses and maybe you want to rename done to completed, right? And you go back and you see that this now doesn't work because we are trying to to compare what's now so we are trying to compare what's now is the to text value of it is now completed. We are still trying to compare that to a text value done. even though the logic shouldn't have changed, right? So we click hide done, these should have been hidden. So now we either need to go and update our filters, completed, and then when we decide that, okay, it should be named done again, this filter is broken. Hide done does nothing. So don't do that, because we are not interested in comparing a text value to a text value. And if you feel like you want to use toText somewhere, just stop and think twice whether you actually need that. You need toText in very few scenarios. You want to, so the first scenario is that, let's say maybe here we can find it somewhere. So you have a format, for instance, and you want to flatten everything that's a rich text. So you want to flatten row references, numbers, dates, etc. You want to remove formatting and compact the space that it takes for this label, for that text value with all these things to take in the doc. So that's when it's valid to use toText in the format, after the format function if you're using the result as a display label. So let me just maybe show you what I mean here. So if you have, let's say, okay, perhaps we don't have this in here, but if you, there are certain scenarios where you are, so here you can see that there's format, and we are, let's say we are conflating a flow and a coda user here. So now we have a formatted text here. So one way to remove any rich formatting is to use toText after format, and actually that's what you should use either way. So remember that idiom, format something something dot toText. Always when you don't need these when you want to basically use that format formula as a result for the display column, always use toText there, but don't use ever toText in your comparisons. Never try to get a flat text value out of the row reference by using toText. Instead, compare that to an actual row reference. Use an at and reference your done row from DB task statuses. This way you're comparing a row to a row, or a lookup value, which is a row from table DB task statuses, to the row. And yeah, I remember that it used to look, again, assigned to options, not choices, options, and it used to be named like that, but previously I had something else there. Anyway, that's just forget about it. Forget about it. Yeah, so I was saying you have your status. Now if you ever want to, for instance, set the conditional format on the to set conditional format, let's say you want to have all your overdue rows as red, instead of making a conditional format on due by, or instead of making a conditional format on is done or on a formula, pick your status, overdue, make all rows, make all columns red for overdue rows, right? Or make them yellow for all reopened ones, or whatnot. So base your conditional formatting on non-hidden columns, so that it's all, and your filters, so that it's always obvious what you are trying to refer to. And generally also, if you have a view and you have something in the table, something that's perhaps calculating the number of tasks that you have unfinished or whatever, always don't ever try to never reference things that are not visible on this very page. So if you are now trying to, I don't know, show is number of my tasks not done, you can take the DB tasks and filter them and do that, but you don't have to do that. You can take my tasks and perhaps filter them. Again, you can filter by is done false, and if you totally remember what you're doing there, it's fine. But another thing is that you can take it's gonna be better if you filter this by status. Status is not done. And don't forget to format your formulas and take the count out of that. So 10 not done tasks, 9 non-done tasks, etc. That's the general good practices. Just you'll thank yourself later when you get back to this page and everything's obvious what's calculating. So that's the core idea behind most of the best practices. You as the doc maintainer should not get confused, because time will pass, things will be added to the doc. Your time is valuable, or my time as a consultant is valuable. Your time as a developer, as a human and not a robot, is valuable. If you can reduce the amount of time you'll need to get back to the doc to understand what's happening and include all the changes that you need to do, the better. That's ultimately our goal, to automate things and also do them mindfully so that we don't have to do stupid work. Yeah, okay, that we cleared. There are a few things that I think left to do here. So I want to add some buttons. So first button is a button to reset the filters. Previously, in some of my tricks on the Coda community, what I used to do, I used to add a button here to reset the filters. So yeah, it's a reset. I use a filter icon here, and I write an action to, let's say, this row, modify rows, hide done set to false, and show assigned to set to the option just me. Yeah. So that's my reset button, right? So that's just me. If I have something else selected, the reset button sets the state of this doc to the original state. The problem here arises, so first I need some name here. I can put a reset name, but it's clutter, right? What I can do it's an interesting trick. You can search for empty character. There is a site, I think, emptycharacter.com. You go copy an empty character to the clipboard, and you can paste it in your column name. So unlike the space, it says name cannot be blank, but this blank character that you copy from this website, Coda actually allows adding this empty space. So that's how you can have a blank column name. And if you need to have multiple column names by that, so let's say you want to have multiple buttons, multiple reset buttons, or just multiple buttons, you can paste this empty character, not once, but you can paste it twice, right? And if you want to have a column that's named the same, like reset, and you also want a column that's named reset, and you cannot have like two same names, right? You can name your column reset and then paste one empty character, and it will let you have multiple columns with the names that appear the same, even though there's this empty character in the end. And if you need the third column named reset, you just paste once, Ctrl V, and paste twice, and this is how you get yet another column named with the same label. You just don't see that there's one empty character, there's two empty characters. But okay, let's say you don't want to deal with empty characters. Okay, we have this reset button here, and let's say we want to have a button here to add a task, and we also name this with 2 empty characters so that this looks like that. And we can actually do that, and this will help us conserve the precious object count, because these buttons here, they don't calculate towards the objects quota. What often happens though is that, okay, you have another place where you want to put this view, right? So perhaps you want to show projects that have tasks assigned to me, or show projects from a given client or whatever. So the thing is, you'll set this view differently on a different page. And now you want to have another reset button. So you'll make yourself the second reset button. That doesn't nullify these values, but it will nullify the filters here, the controls here. And while, okay, having 2 reset buttons, let's say it's your second reset button, you hide the first one, you have here your second one, again, it's called reset. The problem here is that, okay, you add this twice, you have 2 buttons, they are different. You'll already get confused which one of these buttons is tied to which of these pages. When you have 3, 4, 5 places where you use this view, and again, that's what we want to do eventually. We will have, like, I cannot show you another doc that I'm building, but just trust me that I have a doc that I've built for a client. It has my tasks, then it has manage projects, assign tasks to people, assign tasks to this or that week, or reorder projects, do the checklist, whatever. So it's like 8 pages where we have views of your current flow, of the flows table. So, and on each of these pages we have different controls. On one there's a filter for clients, on another there's filter for projects, on the third one there's filter for showing the tasks assigned to just me or my team or whoever. When you have 50 views, 50, that's too much, but let's say we have a dozen views of this table, and we have a dozen of reset buttons. Trust me, you just cannot tell them apart. And especially if you have these blank column names, you absolutely cannot tell them apart, and it takes you a lot of time to figure out which one you need to edit to make changes to your reset. So overall, if you can afford that, if you are planning to use this view in multiple pages, try to not use buttons here. Just add, just trust me, you'll have problems with lots of columns in this table anyway, because you'll have columns like a client selection, and you want to not reuse the same column but make a separate column for client selection on a separate page, so that you change them independently, or you want to reuse a column so that they are changed. You change the client on one page, it changes on all the others. So that's up to you. You'll get confused plenty already, so just to avoid adding to that confusion, short answer, keep your buttons, your reset button, outside of this table. So make yourself a favor, make yourself a button to, again, filter. Even though this means calculating towards your object quota, you set reset my tasks controls. So if I remember, this has my tasks controls. So I call this reset my task controls. Maybe I make it a medium button or whatever. I don't want to have this new line. I can make this a heading to add some space around the button. So it's not as much as the whole line, but again, it's some space added to this button. Maybe a smaller one, or Or maybe, yeah, maybe we just add a new line here so that it looks more cohesively with this separator line. And now in this reset my task controls, what we do is that we take my task controls, modify rows, or we actually do the current flow, modify rows, hide done false, show assigned to just me. And we have a button. It's a separate button, but it controls this specific view. And now let's say we want to copy this and use a view here. We have our project controls, and we have a separate button now that says reset project controls, and again the label is just reset. And we have, let's say we only have the show assigned to, and we have and we set up our reset button. So what happens here? Yeah, hide the title. So we set this reset button now to only perhaps update this. So now the hide done, this resets it here, but this button here, it resets the controls that are visible here, but doesn't reset the controls that are visible elsewhere. So you have, it's a separate button, it's a different button, and now it's only relevant to what you see here, instead of having the button here that maybe resets something else. So that's, and you can have, or you can also put multiple buttons on one row, but we're not gonna gonna have that filter here, so that's what we are stuck on this page. But just for your information, so I recommend having a separate canvas button, a button on the canvas to do the reset of these things, instead of having it here, just because it's gonna be easier for you to maintain. And another button, another thing that we wanted to add, I wanted to add just two objects left. It's a way to add yourself a task. So we want to add a task that's not here. If you remember, I discourage from using the new row button here, and if you're gonna use locking, I recommend that you turn off the capability to add a row. I'm sorry, I'm watching there at sometimes because there I see myself, I see the recording, and I'm checking on my recording time to time. So I hide the add row button from here, even though it doesn't prevent anyone from adding rows. I'm just hiding it so that I'm not encouraging using it. And adding another button in here, making it medium again. Add a task. And if you remember from our part 3, what we are gonna do here, we are not gonna add a row to this table, but we're gonna make ourselves a helper table for adding a task. This table will host a form-like interface to populate the form for adding a task. And we're not gonna use Coda forms for now, no. We are not using Coda forms, that's entirely different thing for an entirely different use case. And I saw someone in the community recommending to use Coda forms as the way to let people enter data into their tables. I haven't yet, to be honest, explored how that is better, what other scenarios it allows you doing, using a form versus using a layout to populate data and then click something to add. Maybe it's a good idea, but I know for sure that you cannot really have a pop-up. So like with, let's say with projects here, you can have a pop-up with a form. I'm not entirely sure that you can have a form embedded here in a layout, that you can show a form here. So we can experiment with that. We can actually try that, but I'm like 50%, 60% sure that you cannot really, you can have a form in here on a page, right? So you can have a form on whatever, DB flows or something. But I don't think that you can have a form on your layout, even though, okay, let's maybe we can, I don't know. Do I have like 5 minutes to try? Let me try. I have DB flows. Let's say I have matched employee. Can I have? Okay, we have some layout 3. Not sure why I'm using that. Now it's a list or drop down. It's a list or drop down. I don't think that I can have a form embedded, or I can have an embed with a form, perhaps. But again, that's, I think, over-engineering it too much. If there's, let me tell you this, I'll take some time to experiment with embedding, using forms within a Coda doc and trying to use it within a pop-up. And if there are any like serious advantages to that approach over using using these layouts, then I'll let you know. I'll record a separate video on that, and I'll be happy to explore that capability. But so far, we're just gonna, yeah, add a new page. Maybe we should just copy the HLP add project and duplicate the table, and it's gonna be add task. Oh, and yeah, we've created a new page and we've created a new table. Oh no, and we're out of our object quota. So can we bring it down by 1? That's the question. Can we bring it down by 1? So one of the things that we can do, we can put all the views into one page, but then we lose that capability of seeing on the left pane, on the navigation pane, whether all the names of our views. Okay, let me finish building this, and then we can perhaps see what we can do with. So it's add duplicate name. Where are we using that? Add a task button. No need to name it. We need this name without anything for our view. Add a task. And just for add new project button, project name. So yeah, add a task. As usual, we filter everything out. Enter task name. Select a project. It's gonna be our lookup from the DB projects table. Enter task name. What else do we have for a task? We can select team responsible. We can make it required. It's okay. I think I shouldn't go through this on the video again. I'll make a jump cut, set this up, maybe have a dinner, and get back to you and continue recording when this is done. Okay, I'm back and I've finished creating in a view for this. I hope that the recording doesn't screw up the sound now, because I left this paused for quite a while. So yeah, select the project, enter task name, select team responsible, assign to, it's an optional one. There's validation on these fields. Set due by, which is also a required one. And I created a new formula for validation message to include all those validation invalid states for select the project, enter task name, etc. Changed the is valid formula and changed the created task, because there's quite a few more fields of adding a row to DB tasks. There's no need to generate anything from from samples, so that's why I deleted that step. And then open window. I'm not focusing on this row in my tasks. I'm trying to use the same view, the projects view, manage projects view. Although on the second thought, since I have my button, I don't want to jump to another page, so I have my button on this page. This means that I would like to focus on the row in this view. So let's copy the view of this my tasks view, and when a task is added, let's focus on that one, even if it's filtered out. So that's gonna be a URL like that, row ID is that, and then created task, URL split last, and finally delete rows to remove this helper row. Okay, and this is a fake one. Let's add a filter here to hide all rows from this table. Oh, and I also added quite a few templates. So I renamed validation create project to button create project, button add a task. So these are button labels, and these are the new validation messages. So let's go to my task, and in add a task button, what we're gonna do now is HLP is add a task, add row, activate, and make it a blue one, just because why not make it a blue one. And also what I also like to do is to insert a dot in here to separate the separate buttons that have to deal with the filters in the top, and then separate and then another section to have some buttons for something that has to do with the content, changing the content on the page. So yeah, add a task. Okay, make this a show alert only for errors. And I also forgot to update our automation. So we need to now delete rows not only from the add project, but add a task button filter. Again, modified. Add a task table filter modified on less than now minus hours 1. Delete rows. So now we have to clean up abandoned rows from 2 helper tables. So whenever you add a helper table, don't forget to update your automation. So what's wrong with it? Why does it give us an error? Oh yeah, I forgot a comma in here. Right. Add a task, select a project. So Patreon, enter task name, test, added task, team responsible engineering Jonathan, and set due by whatever, tomorrow 10 p.m. Add a task. Here's our task in status to do. We can also update our validation to check whether the due by is in the future or in the past. Let's maybe do that. For that, validation due date time in past. And what I'm usually doing, I'm setting a warning emoji then. Due date and time is in the past. New line, tab. Why wouldn't it copy the tab here? Interesting behavior. Let's make ourselves a tab again. Interesting. First time seeing this. Anyway, view date and time is in the past. Let's just make it one line and figure out. Although no, it doesn't. It bothers me more than it should have. Why doesn't it insert a tab? Something's clearly wrong here. Okay, whatever. Is in the past, select valid due date and time. Yeah, and update the validation message to now say set due date is blank, and if set due by is less than now minute, then, because we don't want this again, we don't want this formula to recalculate every second, then validation date time in the past. Yeah. So now add a task, select a project Patreon, test task, select team responsible engineering. We may leave out the assign to, set due by. If we keep it in the past, oh yeah, and we forgot to update the is valid clause, and set due by is more or equal than now. So now the button won't be active when you select due by in the past. Product management, Michael, due date and time is in the past. And now it's fine. We add a task. So okay, and we wanted to, when the task is added, we wanted to focus on that created task. So let's find where I guess I didn't finish setting up that piece, although I did. So something here is clearly not right. Okay, let's try this again. Blog. Okay, it doesn't want to focus on the row, but perhaps that's because when we try, and that's also a problem when we use the created task. So we have a created task there. Let's hide the filter for a while. When we try to take the URL of that created task URL, split last, what we get is the row ID of the row in here, of this row, for some reason. So if we take the URL of the cell, we don't actually get the URL of the task, but we get the URL of, well, this row. So what we need to do is on the tasks table, first unhide all the columns, because it's a bad practice to keep hidden columns in your database table, because a dog builder always needs to see what's in their table, and they need this so that they know that we already have this column or we don't have it, so that they don't add it twice. So what we need is, we need to, for each row, we need to get its row ID or UID. So not just the row ID, but something that's taken as a part of this row URL split last. So for rows that already have view ID, row ID, it's gonna be letter R and a number, and for new rows, it's gonna have this intrinsic row ID, the unique row ID that's assigned on the browser side, a significantly random ID. And the row only gets the proper ID, I mean the numeric ID, the sequential number, when it's saved to the server. But for the time that the row is not yet saved to the server, let's say you add 1,000 rows and it takes code a row a second or something like that to be actually saved to the database. But we still need to be able to reference that row to activate the row, and in place of the row ID, this internal row UID is used, and that's one way to get it. And if you touch this formula, you'll see that eventually it gets replaced with the row ID, but you can use the UID just fine until you have the row ID. If you want that to be replaced automatically, you perhaps need to set a formula on something like this. If this row ID is blank, then you have that. Otherwise, well, you also have that. But this now ensures that when row ID is changed, it triggers recalculation of this in this cell. So as soon as the row gets their row ID, their unique ID gets replaced with the row ID. So we kind of recalculate the URL. The recalculation there is triggered when row ID stops being blank. So that's an idiom for you to remember. So if row ID is blank, we basically just pull in the same thing, whether it's blank or not, but the inclusion of this expression makes sure that Coda recalculates this column when it suspects that the result here may change. So it's row ID or UID. And we will use, on the projects table, we also need this. And I guess we have the same problem on add a project table, and on the add button table we need to update so that we cannot get our URL from here, but we need to use created project, row ID or UID. And same here with add a task. We need to use the created tasks, row ID or UID. And now this should work. We add a task, select a project, enter task name, new task that should be focused below, team responsible, whatever, due by in a few days, add a task, and I don't know why it still didn't open the link. It should have. Let's have just one more look. So create task. Let's pull that in here. So yeah, select the project, test. Okay, now it kind of jumped in here. Perhaps it has something to do with doing this on the same page. So let's test it again. I know that sometimes navigation will not work when we're trying to focus on something on the same page. There might be some workarounds for that. I frankly don't remember, but yeah, there might be some workarounds on how to focus on the right row. Maybe a delay there is needed or something like that. We may try that. Let's try that. Let's try opening the. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just perhaps amend the tutorial later, because I cannot really use more time than we've already used on this. Nah, it doesn't want to highlight that pop-up, but maybe I'm just doing something wrong. Maybe it's something with the URL that I'm constructing. So not really sure. Okay, let me delete these. Yeah, that's how we add an interface for adding a task. We can have also here, we can add so let's imagine that we have here a filter for a project, filter for a project. Blank is all. So we have a project that we select. So show only tasks from a blog or from Patreon, or we need to update our reset button to nullify that. Select show project. We reset this to blank, and we need to update our filter to include that parameter now. Current show project is blank, or this row project equals current flow show project. So this is now gonna work. Show tasks for everyone, but show only tasks for project blog, show only tasks for playground doc, show only tasks for a community page, and reset our filter. So that's how we add another control to this setup. Right. Let me quickly, oh yeah, I forgot to do one important thing. So we have our log table, right, where we change the task status to doing, not done, whatever. So first, when we change the status, we should now use the status, right? So we have more than 2 statuses now. We should not hard code it to done, not done, but we, instead of that, we can now use the this row status and the actual status string. We don't want to insert the lookup, we insert the status string, and also format to text, because yeah, what if we have formatted values there? So if and let me just show you how that may turn out. So let's say we forget to add 2 tags here, and I change status to done, I change status to reopened. Let's look into our log entries. So yeah, and let's say I forgot to No, I didn't forget. So status done, status reopened. But let's imagine that in your task statuses, you actually, instead of using conditional formatting, you are using a text with a highlight, right? So that's how you keep it. Like with to do, you don't use conditional formatting here. You use a formatted text value. So what happens now? Do we have an overdue one? Okay, bad example, not the overdue one. Let's remove the highlight, but let's say done. We, instead of having conditional formatting, we made it just a green text with a green value. And now we are marking a task as done and marking task as undone. If we now look into our log entries, you're gonna see that it included the formatting of the label. So it just took the label from statuses, right? We didn't even insert the lookup. We took the status column of the lookup. But still, the text here contains a formatted string. So what it added to the log entries, it inserted the formatted string into the format template. And if we now inspect what's there in the field, you'll see that here these are simple strings where there's one character per one character per character, right? So this string takes as much space in the doc as there are as many like bytes, twice the bytes that there are characters, because each character takes 2 bytes. But for formatted text, it saves all this structure because formatted text is saved differently in Coda. So it has to remember all this information that characters from 0 to 47 are not formatted, but characters from 47 to 51 have the green dark foreground and green light background. So this information is saved when you store messages in, you have formatted pieces in your when you have formatted pieces of your formula. So what I'm trying to say, to reiterate the point from earlier in this video, that when you are using format and you're inserting pieces into that format, don't forget, and that's what I did, don't forget to append to text here, because this will make sure that the text that's saved wherever you are saving the, like in this case, we don't want that formatting to be saved, right? We want that to be flat text. We want the log table to be as compact as possible. So when you do this to text, even if you keep that green highlight, and now you mark it's done, not done, the values are gonna be saved without any formatting. So this will not happen. It will just save the characters with no metadata about the formatting. So that's why you should use, that's the one of the very few valid cases when you should actually use toText. Is with the format function when you don't care about saving the formatting from here. Right. So, but let's remove that. And that's an example for you, a very valid one. Okay, we have our log table, we have our log types, and we are not using the task added and project created. So we need to amend these. We need to amend buttons from create project, add the logging step in here. We can type it again, or we can just go into whatever. We can go into here and copy that piece. DB log entries add row, we just copy that because we don't want to type that again. Add project, add that logging piece here. We added before navigating away from here. So project created, timestamp now, object is created project, actual user is user, current employee, and our format is project created message template, current employee name, this row created project, and I guess it's gonna be its name. And this row, what else do we save for the project? I think for the project created, we cannot see the description here. Need to scroll down the formula. So we have a created project, project created, employee and project name, and nothing else. So we don't have the status there. Yeah. I just realized that my space obstructs the pages that we have here. So yeah, we have these helpers here, add project, add a task. I added these pages just so that my face doesn't obstruct anything. So we've added this. We're gonna add the same to add a task button. The delay didn't help us, so project created, task added. Again, task added, just employee and task name. Created task, format, task added, message template, created task, task, because that's our task name. And in our, here I think I used task title, and let's be consistent with how we call things. So task has a title, and in our added task we have enter task title. Let's be consistent with our names. Okay, that's how we oh yeah, added task to project. So we need to keep the project, to save the project name. So first here, I think I forgot to select the task. Oh yeah, this row task, it's a task name already. Add a task, we need to capture that we added the task for a project. So there's the third parameter, this row created task, project name. Okay, now we should have logging. So every time we create a new project, there should be a log entry that Jonathan created project test project. And wherever we add a task, and by the way, if we have a project selected here, let's update this button so that when it adds a row, it already pre-populates the project. Select the project, current flow, show project. So if it's blank, it's blank. If it's not blank, if it's a project selected, it pre-populates that with a selected project. And let's also pre-populate maybe a team assigned and maybe pre-populate assigned to ourselves. So if we create a task, it's a task created for ourselves. Or, well, let's not bother. Let's just pre-populate. So if we already have a filter here on Codepedia, we click edit task, select the project, is already defaulted to Codepedia. Team responsible, whoever, set due for now, add a task, all tasks on Codepedia. Here's our Codepedia test task, and here's our log entries, the task added. Jonathan added task this to project that. And now you can, like, homework for you would be to take, if you're a patron, you will have access to this doc. Take this doc and also add the capability to capture, to do, well, right now you can see that you can freely choose team responsible and freely choose assigned to. So if you want to log that as well, that the assigned person changed, you've reassigned this task to someone else. You also need to build an interface around that so that it gets properly logged, or maybe there's a dialogue. So maybe you don't care about that as much, then you can keep it as is. But if you're building an app-like interface, that's something that you will probably want to do. Make yet another, either a helper table, or yeah, perhaps a helper table where you put a task that you're going to edit, where you can select the new team responsible or a new assignee, and when you click save, it applies the change, it logs that to the log entries table, and ideally these columns are read-only. And well, the way to make these columns read-only is to hide the original columns and make the columns that simply read. So you can prepend the columns that should not be in use with an underscore. That's what I'm usually doing. I do team responsible equals team responsible, but with a formula, so you cannot change this. And now I hide the original one. Assigned to, again, I may, well, duplicate a column, rename a column, and just copy from assigned to and hide the original one. I don't need that. Same with due by. This is the one that we don't want to touch. We duplicate as empty column. What's important is that we keep the formatting. We don't have to set up the format again. We hide the original one. We keep only the one that's calculated with a formula. The status is already a formula. And project, a good thing is to not have this as a pop-up. Let's insert a related column, project name, call it a project, not have this bubble, and here we are. We have everything's functional, but our table is pretty clean. And we can also add some conditional format for rows to take the most important piece, the task, and make it bold. So now we have a nicer tasks table. And it's not assigned to, but if we want to reassign this to someone, we either go to manage project to select this, or we build an interface again that shows a pop-up to update, to reassign a task to someone. So ideally you have some extra flow to do the initial assignment of tasks. And and yeah, we've run out of the object quota to implement this in our starter template. But if I come up with an idea of how to do that, maybe reduce the number of items we have in our starter template. But again, I don't really want to dump this down, because this is a doc that I'll use to make screenshots for my upcoming blog article, and I'll use this doc for yeah, as a reasonable template. Maybe something is really extra here. Maybe we can get rid of the log, or I don't know, maybe reduce the number of these, remove these folders just for the sake of reducing the number of objects in our doc. But yeah, tough choices. Okay, so what? There's gonna be part 6 or not? I think I still need something like 15 minutes to do the grouping and sorting. I may take a very short break and finish recording this video in like a few minutes. Yeah, I'm gonna make a jump cut, take a short break here, and I'll probably finish it now because this is getting ridiculous, right? Okay, I gave it a thought, and obviously the right way to do this with the object quota would be to forget about the object quota and just do the right thing, do a good doc to be shared with my patrons who are most likely paying quota customers or not just rolling with the free plan. And perhaps if there's demand or if there's interest, make a template that's under that limit. Perhaps I'll have and just remove some things from that smaller template. Maybe I'll remove this nesting of the folders, or I'll remove certain helpers, or I'll remove certain buttons. I don't know yet, but if I'll just, yeah, after I record this video, I'll move this doc a a paid workspace or my personal workspace and share that doc with everyone. And you also have to copy this doc into your paid workspace, or if you copy this to a free workspace, you still have 14 days or something to delete what you don't need and maybe reorganize just like you need this. Okay, so I don't have much time left really. So there's just one thing that I want to finish is grouping and sorting with the controls on the flows table. With assigning things to a team responsible, I'll do this off camera. I'll add that capability to this doc after I record this video. This will be sort of a homework for you to examine and figure out yourself how it's done without me talking through every step. So yeah, another thing that I want to show is grouping and sorting. So I want to be able to group tasks. Maybe not as much sorting, because sorting we can just sort them by due date, or we can keep done, not done in the top. So okay, yeah, we need to define the scope of what we want to do. So we want to we want to group by either project or status, yeah, or team responsible. And we want to, and team responsible, let's not make it a lookup, but just a string, right? We don't need that thing here now. It's gonna work fine because the filter is set not on the visible columns, and that's when it's okay to set a filter not on the visible columns but on the hidden columns, on the well, actual lookup columns, and keep so yeah, in a way you can forget a bit about what I was saying about that. It's so totally fine to set filters on hidden columns, because as the filters, end users will not go and will not change the filters. It's your responsibility as a dog builder in your dog builder role to set up proper filters. Yeah, in a way, show project also can be not a lookup but simply a select list to use values from db projects and use their project name, because I really hate seeing these. Yeah, you could also apply conditional formatting on that, like we did here with these lookups. But let's say we all projects have unique names. We can assume that in a way, and we can update our filter to, yeah, so this project name equals to equals to a project. So now it's cleaner and assigned to, again, that's, we assign it to a person. And it's a text. I'm wondering what happened with the last one, so let's examine what happened there. No, it's fine. Not sure why it was telling me that it's the wrong lookup. Yeah, one thing that you see yourself doing very often, so okay, the grouping and sorting, again, I'll probably add that, I don't know, I kind of feel that I still need something like part 6 and half an hour to talk this through in a good way. Let me take another jump cut and another thought on this. Yeah, I'm a bit tired now, so I'll just stop recording for now, and there's gonna be part 6 with the final beautifications of this doc. Okay. Cheers.